So did you have a good Thanksgiving, Patrick?
It was very low key this year. My parents, I kind of played it safe.
Oh, wait, sorry, my computer was muted. Could you say that again?
Yeah, it was very low key. My parents, I played it safe this year. Just
Okay, it's officially unmuted. One more time. I'm so sorry.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I played it safe this year with my parents. You just with all this going around, it just it's going to be a different year. So
Agreed. I know usually.
Oh, go
What?
ahead, Gab. No, go ahead.
Usually, like, we go to Jason's aunts and his whole family is there, and then we go to my grandmother's and my whole family is there. But we literally, I see my parents every day. So we did go over there for like in a half an hour, and then we went to Jason's parents' house for dinner, and it was just his parents, his brother, us, and Philip. It's like such a weird year.
it is very weird. But I guess big picture,
Yeah.
Parent, did your mom cook at least and make you a doggy plate to pick up, Patrick?
She sure did. She did good. It was a very, very good doggy plate. So
yeah, good. All right. I have to say, I don't understand, but Zoom already looks better than Teams.
Yeah, it does today. Yeah.
I switched locations to get some light.
We were talking about Christmas gifts while we were waiting, Krista, when you weren't there yet. So I was telling them all what they needed. And Erica needed a light because she was in the dark. And, well, Gabby just was talking about, it's all about Philip this year because of her new baby, who can really enjoy it.
Right.
So
I said Eric and Matthew needed a razor.
You teachers will appreciate this. So Jack, I asked him, what do you want from Santa this year? And he says, a backpack. And I said, a backpack? What are you going to do with that? And he said, homework. So I don't know if he's hanging around with my sister-in-laws too much down there during the remote learning, but he wants a backpack to do homework with pencils and paper. So
How old is he now?
2.
2. Run with that.
Yeah. He's ready.
Just start
Give him a
giving
little
him
desk, set him up, yeah. All right, who we're missing? Eric?
Yes.
Mr. Montaro, are you ready for your presentation that is 15 minutes or less?
Absolutely.
He walked into my office the other day with a 40-page PowerPoint, no lie. And he said, here's the presentation. And I said, you can walk right.
That's how I get at least 20 though. Because
you did. Yeah.
Did you have all of your animations, Tony?
No, I'm sans animations here with the Zoom. That's enough.
Okay.
I don't want to make it too crazy.
Eric, did you have a wardrobe change? He's not. Are you listening to me, Eric?
Oh, take advantage of it, Greg. Go for it.
Eric Herbert, report to the police captain's office right now. Can you hear me? You're muted.
Sorry, I had my son's headphones plugged in, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't hear any of you guys.
Oh. I asked if you had a wardrobe change in our break. Did you change shirts?
No, it's just the lighting. It's a different camera because the other one was on my phone. Now I'm on the desktop.
Everyone's tricking me today.
I like Zoom better. I think Zoom's much better.
Yeah.
Zach, you were disappearing in the background.
Yeah, I have the background from the TV show The Office behind me. I just figure I use that as my go-to Zoom background.
Yeah. Well, let's hope nobody walks in your background drinking.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Now tell me, doesn't Eric and Matthew look like they're completely different first time?
Yes.
You're on the computer now too, though, Matthew, right?
No, I'm on my phone again. My Zoom is crashing on my computer, so
Aren't
They're
you
good.
aren't you the tech person?
right with this like old Lenovo laptop that's been passed around many, many years.
You've been hanging around Patrick too much. All the
Nice.
technology breaks.
Right? But I'm
It
here
happens,
when
Matthew.
it does. But we make it work. So
Eric, I gotta tell you, when your phone dropped, my heart would jump each time. It was like you were
Like,
falling.
Lenovo laptop
Oh,
that's,
really?
passed
Yeah,
around
it's just
many,
like
many
propped
years.
up on the side of my computer screen. And yeah, I just kept knocking it over.
Just let me know when you guys are ready. We can get rolling. I don't know if we have everyone.
We don't have Colleen yet, but
Okay.
we could probably log in and do the flag and she'll.
Sure. All right. So we just need a motion to come out of executive session at 6:35. Just need a motion.
Come on.
Eric, and I'll make the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then we just need a motion to reconvene the public session of the Board of Education at 6:35.
So moved.
All right, Krista, in a second.
Second.
All right, Erica, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Now we will stand for the pledge to the flag.
Matthew got his flag. There he goes.
Of course.
I
pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the
To
the
the
flag
flag
Of the
of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Okay. It says attendance sheets, but we're going to say the phone number here a few times because if anyone has a question for the board, they can call in and the district clerk, Debbie Bunt, will take your message and bring it into me and then we will discuss it at the end of the meeting. So the number to call is 807-3500. It's 807-3500. It's the district central office and Debbie is there to pick up that phone. So anyone watching who has a question, please call 807-3500. And with that, we will move into any comments from the Board of Education. Everybody staying healthy? All right, we're going to move then into our first and only presentation tonight, which is the beginning of our 21-22 school year budget. And Mr. Montoro is going to kind of take over the screen and wow you with his PowerPoint.
Absolutely. I was going to play It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year, but that might have been too much for you, Mr. Watilla. So no animation, just plain vanilla. So here we go.
I'll allow you to sing it.
No, you don't want that. Okay. So are we all
Looks good.
using my screen at this point? Yes?
Yes, it looks good.
Very good. All right. For some reason, let's see. There we go. All right. I think we're good to go. Okay, so starting out the season, we are going to begin tonight with mostly just financial considerations, things to think about as we go through the budget process. Primarily, the focus is going to be on district reserves. So the major theme of the presentation tonight is to set the table for the coming months and lay out the process and provide some context for the presentations to come, which will be more in-depth and drill down into the programs and operations of the district. Okay, looking at the agenda, we're going to start with a general overview of the major dates on the adopted budget calendar. The second item will be a focus on the district reserve plan so that we can utilize this information through the 21-22 budget development process to identify the appropriate opportunities to utilize reserves as a source of revenue to balance the budget. So you may remember this from last season. Lovely table set up for a meal. Now we will have more data-heavy presentations in the future, which I know you're all excited for. But I'm going to incorporate more of the data analytics as I work on building more of the financial models as information becomes accessible and available. At this time, we're just setting the table. Really, at this point, I do have a lot of data, but there's a variety of directions in which we can go over the next couple of months. Obviously, we have a changing administration on the federal side of things. In terms of the state, a lot of talk about mid-year cuts that I don't think will prove out this year. I think if anything, we'll see a reduction in aid in January, and we'll probably ride this year out. The significance of those cuts, though, are yet to be known. So I don't know if we want to do too much at this point until we really get a better handle on the revenue side of the budget to really kind of set the stage for where we need to be for expenditures. But in my strategic planning process, this is year 3 of budget development within the larger scope of a number of larger initiatives that are coming to fruition. These initiatives will continue to provide direction and vision in the development of the budget process and the alignment of strategic planning to the district programs and services.
Click.
You can't hear it this time, though. So what have we accomplished? So even in these difficult times, a lot has been accomplished this year and in the years leading up to this. In year 1, significant security and capital improvements, the Raptor system. The district is completely outfitted with cameras in every single building now. We have digital radios and repeaters throughout the district for very good coverage in terms of communication within the building and within the confines of North Tonawanda and beyond. We had a technology condition survey completed. The 2015 capital improvement project was done. The fleet plan was started to be implemented. Moving on to year 2, off of the gains on year 1, we acquired the buses through that replacement plan using reserves. The comprehensive technology plan was completed. Smart Schools was actually submitted today. BOCE's spend, we did look at using that in the budget and getting aid for all the technology purchases that we were making, which wasn't necessarily utilized in the past. An energy performance project was started and not quite completed as of today, but we're well along that project, which should be wrapping up in the summer. The finishing touches on the 2015 project, putting up the baseball nets, finishing up some fences, getting the tennis courts in. And then we also have a detailed reserve plan, which we'll take a look at tonight. So, all that said, all these items are helping to shape the budget in a way that we can now develop a detailed and strategic long-range plan, which we'll have on the agenda for next board meeting, with replacement schedules in a number of areas that we did not have scheduled before. These plans can be tweaked every year based on circumstances. But we will not be abandoned because these initiatives have become the rudder for the future direction of the district. Now, with that idea in mind, in year 3, we'll be making some slight navigational changes to adjust with the winds of change. So I really like this graphic because, we're in some turbulent waters here, and we're going to have to kind of reset that wheel a bit and make sure we're getting from point A to point B, maintaining course. So the goal is to stay the course so that we will move the district in the proper direction to maintain high quality programs and services. So the appetizer tonight will provide some key information with the full courses of budgeting yet to come. Now, one of my fun slides. So some of you might be a fan of the show. I personally am not, but I just kind of like this meme. Brace yourself, indigestion is coming. So we have this big meal, but now, unfortunately, 2020 came along, has done some damage to the plans. But as I said before, one of the important pieces in putting these plans together is it allows you to modify them as needed, but to stay a course. So even though we have
I'm eating and I'm on a boat in rough waters. Get ready for the seasick back.
That's right. So the future still holds opportunity and hope, and we know things will improve at some point. So item number 1, the budget calendar. So this year I decided to put a little bit more of a visual up to kind of condense this. So in January, we're looking at the first budget study session with that long range plan I spoke of that we'll be building upon every year and tweaking every year around this time. Study session 2, we'll have that governor budget at that point. We'll take a look at operations, where we stand there. And I feel like we'll have a really solid budget this year. James has done a fantastic job working on that budget, understanding it, and I think we're going to have a really good plan going forward with maintenance and operations. Study session 3, that will have our first draft. We'll talk about transportation. Just this week, I updated the long-range fleet plan also, so we'll have some more details on that. Study session number 4 will be the final review and Board of Education adoption. And then in May, we'll have the budget hearing and the budget vote, as long as things stay the course and we don't have a situation like we had this year in which things got moved to June. But if we do have to do this absentee ballot, we know the process now. So
and these are the main meetings of each month, but remember we have 2 meetings every month. So if there's questions or things that come up in the long range plan on the 6th, we can do that at the 2nd January meeting. And then same thing when we get the governor's budget, which is being optimistic that I'll have it on the 3rd. We could then look into it. The February 3rd is also a good date because our retirement incentive requires people to let us know by February 1st. So then we can look at numbers and savings in that as well, going into then the whole other transportation and final review. So even though it looks like 4 meetings, it's really 8.
Yes, and I'll tuck in between these study sessions those updates. Again, not to throw everything at you at once.
That's a good idea, Tony.
I'm learning. So agenda item number 2, the reserves. So looking at the results of the audit this year, again, we're performing very well in terms of revenues exceeding expenses. So since 2016-17 budget, we've been able to maintain and control expenses at a level so that revenues have exceeded those expenditures. The expectation with 21-22, though, is that there's going to be a main revenue stream, that being specifically state aid, that's going to take a significant hit. So because we are close, and this is a sign of good, proper budgeting, that we're above our expenses, but not so much that we're building excessive reserves. Unfortunately, this year, those expenses most likely will exceed our revenues just because of the cuts. So that said, what are the options to close the gap? So these are things that we're going to want to consider as we go through this budget season. So we could cut expenditures at the same proportion as the decrease in revenues. So I do believe there is still some trimming that is appropriate and necessary in the budget. But you don't want to cut to the point that it compromises services to the students. So we want to maintain the high quality of services that we have in the district. We could use appropriated fund balance, but that is not a sustainable long-term plan. If it happens, that's very well could be the case. But if that happens year after year, at some point we will deplete our fund balance without a doubt. Now the use of reserves, kind of similar to appropriated fund balances, but what we're doing in this case is it's aligned to a plan that we're matching specific expenditures with appropriate reserves. So they're not always one-time hits. Usually that's the best use of reserve, where it's a one-time, it's not a continuing expense. But in this case, we do have specific reserves that we can match to expenditures that we think might be one-time jumps. For example, TRS, ERS. If there's a large increase in that particular expenditure area, we would know over time, with the economic cycles that we have, that at some point there would be a downturn. That wouldn't be something that we'd have to sustain over a long period of time. Now, if you hire staff, though, that's something that you probably got on the books for the better part of 20 years. So, really we want to match the reserves to things that are, are going to be more one-time or short-term hits in terms of expenditures. Now, if we look at our fund balance over time, again, this reflects somewhat the economic cycles that we experience, the up, and downturns. So we can see that over the past 4 years, since 16-17, we've been building on those reserves over good times. So these historical trends, play out time and again. So I think when you hit these turbulent economic times, what we need to do is just remember that we're looking at our district balance sheet right now, and our balance sheet, we've been able to add to the equity of the district over the past 4 years. Now we're kind of hitting that cycle. We're going to be on a downturn, and I don't think we necessarily need to be concerned when this starts to decrease, because it's happened in the past and we've been able to replenish in those good economic times. So reserves really are those rainy day funds. So now is the time to take that equity that has been built up over the past 4 years, invest it back in the programs to maintain services during these turbulent economic times. But obviously we must be prudent in the usage of these funds because they are not unlimited financial assets. So there are cost reductions that we can pair with the use of reserves, but obviously we're in those times where use of reserves is very appropriate and more than likely justified to maintain where we're at. So luckily the plan is here, and all the balances that we have in these reserves as of now, these are the restricted funds, are as of June 30th, 2020. Right now they are gaining interest in investments and accounts. Right now the gains on those are not very significant, so not really
and
worth
restricted fund balance it's got to be spent in that title where it is.
Yes.
So even though you see $8 million, it's not $8 million on program, it's $8 million spread across those specific reserves if we needed to, because we got in trouble.
Right. So that's the concept of aligning specific expenditures to specific reserves. And these reserves usually exist because many times these are not those long-term expenses. They're the one-time hits that you might have to take on. So I'm going to have to escape out of this for a moment, and I think I'm going to have to reshare my screen because I'm going to go to the reserve plan now. And I believe everybody has a printed copy.
Yeah.
Share. I'm going to go back. Let's find. All right. So now you're all looking at the fund balance reserve plan.
Yes, we are.
So this will be the time frame now that we have this in place. We'll revisit this every November here going forward. The audit and finance committee will be taking a look at this over the summer, and we'll also revisit this towards the end of the year if we have surpluses to kind of determine where we may want to put those surpluses. Now in the plan, if everybody can see the highlighting I have here, I just highlighted a couple of key points. I'm not going to go through this entire document. Obviously I have it to peruse at your liking, but I did highlight some of the key points. In terms of the overview, obviously funding reserves is vital to the long-term health and stability of the district. So that's a theme that we'll come back to. They are savings for future projects, acquisitions, and other allowable purposes. As Mr. Wojtyla pointed out, these reserves are created for very specific purposes, but they can fill gaps in the revenue in your budget. Again, when you have spikes in retirements, or if you have a capital project coming up and you want to offset the local share so there's not a tax impact, that's where we have those good use of reserves, because it's a one-time deal when you're dealing with these typically. Also here, in uncertain economic times, reserve funds can also provide officials with a welcome budgetary option that help mitigate the need to cut services or raise taxes. So that's another key highlight we want to have going into this budget season specifically. And also minimizes the possibility of draconian mid-year budget cuts. So again, we don't want to impact students. Many times when you make those cuts, it's hard to recover from those, and they also kind of reverberate into future years. So we want to make sure that we're not harming our program so that it takes us years to get back to where we were. They also provide financial flexibility in times of financial distress. So all these concepts that I've highlighted here are things that we need to think about. At the end of the year, budget surpluses, we would take a look at those, determine the best uses and where to place those. Again, something that will come back to this report come May, June. Now, one thing is reserves can also cause confusion when their purpose is not clearly understood by the community. So again, that idea that these reserves are created for very specific purposes is key to put out there. And I think we did a really good job of that with the capital purchase of the buses. So when we created that reserve, it was specifically identified for buses, and that seemed to be something that was very accepted by the community. And in this budget, I would expect that we would utilize the rest of that money to kind of finish out our fleet plan and to fill one of the gaps that we will probably have within the budget. So again, use of reserves as one-time revenues that assist in tough budgetary times. That's the key thing that we're kind of looking for in the use of these reserves, using them for very specific things that are not continuing expenses that we know will hopefully drop off over time, or a spike in an expense we know should fluctuate and turn down. And then also, just one thing I wanted to point out here, the board is to review and update this document annually. So now that we have it in the policy, we should be reviewing this every year. So there's a number of key summary items that I put in here that kind of take what's in this plan and distill it down a bit for everybody to think about. One of the things I highlighted here too, that would be important, even though we are in tough budgetary times, I think it is still important to kind of bring down that appropriation of fund balance, because the idea of appropriating fund balance means you're going to spend it. And spending and burning fund balance is not a long-term sustainable solution. So one thing that has happened, though, even though we've been appropriating $5 million in fund balance, we've actually been to the good in terms of revenues and expenditures. So I think it is appropriate to reduce fund balance, but it sometimes is difficult to do because you have to find a cut somewhere on the expenditure side. But I think I'm getting a better feel for what are, true expenses that we need to have some contingency for, and what are things that probably are maybe a bit on the heavy side. So as you go through this document, just to kind of go through it, every reserve that we have now has a detail on the authority of when we could use it. Some are voter approval. Some the board can just do a resolution to utilize that reserve. So workers' compensation, one that we are very heavily funded on in a certain sense, because we are self-funded. So if we have a comp claim, we're triaging that and paying that. We're self-insuring. So this is something I think we should look at over the next couple of years, maybe looking at different options in terms of our self-insured claims and how we're utilizing our insurance. So something to revisit. I wouldn't say that we'd use this for the claims that we have at this moment until we do a little bit more of an analysis on this particular reserve. Unemployment insurance reserve. This is one that is not funded.
We just started that, didn't we?
What's that?
What was this one? Unemployment?
Yeah, unemployment reserve. So if we look at the funding on this one and the balance, again, all of our balances are pretty much stable over the last several years, because we really haven't tapped into reserves. And you really should be using reserves every year, because you typically are these one-time hits that justify the use of them. Now, if you look at our unemployment, obviously this could be one that we would maybe want to tap into depending on circumstances. If you look here, I do have a narrative. I don't know if you can see the highlighting that I'm doing here. But I put a narrative in here in terms of like what could be our maximum hit for a certain number of employees. Now, I didn't put this in here because I think this is what's going to happen. Just giving an example, especially in this COVID time with some of the changes of, what this actually covers in terms of if this reserve were to be utilized. Retirement contribution. Now, this is one that I feel is very useful because, again, this is one of those that we just need a resolution, no vote or anything of that nature. And ERS is likely one of the culprits going forward, where we're going to see the contribution rates increase. Now, if you look at the balance that we have in this account, it is low, in my opinion. Really, the ideal balance is between 30 and 45% of non-instructional payroll, because ERS covers the civil service type employee, not the teaching staff. And you really want about 30 to 45% in this fund, because that will result in 2 to 3 years of funding and ERS contributions. Again, when you have these market fluctuations, usually you're looking at 3 years that you kind of have one of those markets where, you know, the stock market really isn't doing well. So we have to contribute now to this fund to keep people in the fund solvent. So really we should be, and I think it's very appropriate to have around 2.6 million in this reserve based on our payroll. So that is one that I think we definitely could look at in terms of if there is a spike in ERS, we could use that to kind of fill that gap. TRS is one that we created not too long ago. Now this is the teacher side of the ledger. Again, ideal balance, right around 2.6 million based upon 10% of our instructional payroll. Right now it's 0, so obviously it's very underfunded. The thing with this one though is you can only contribute 2% per year. So this is one that you'd kind of have to slowly roll up. The other weird thing about TRS is that there's actually not an invoice that we pay. It's a reduction in our state aid. So this would kind of just supplement revenues in terms of state aid that we don't get. So it's not really paying an invoice. ERS, we actually pay an invoice for that one. Next reserve, property loss insurance. Really, this is for if you have some type of insurance loss, right? Exactly as it says. Now, we don't have any money here, but this is another one that is good to kind of have on hand if you do have some type of emergency. We don't currently have one, but there's other reserves that I think maybe would take priority over this, but I just included it in the analysis because I think it's another good school district reserve to utilize. Insurance reserve, very similar to, you're kind of like, well, what's the difference between this one and the others? I guess we'd have to dig in a little bit deeper. They're both kind of the same, but this is a liability and casualty specific. Again, I think this is funded in a way that, you know, it's appropriate because there's really no ideal balance. But I guess if we had a casualty or loss, I hope it wouldn't be over $1 million judgment. So you just don't know with this one. Again, it's just one of those what ifs. Tax certiorari. This is really if we have, and there's no money in this right now, but it's a good reserve to have if we have any challenges against assessments. And we did have one this year, and it resulted in a refund of taxes to one of the local businesses because they were reassessed, but it was only like $1,000. So I'm not going to put $1,000 in reserve. I'm just going to pay that out of the general fund. But this is a good one. So if we have a big claim where it looks like we might have to refund somebody, you know, $200,000, I would say we'll know about it because it'll be in court. And every year I ask the lawyers, you know, does it look like we're going to have any claim that's going to result in us having to pay back taxes? You know, if they told me yes, then I would say and recommend to you that we fund this. But right now there's really nothing outside of that $1,000 refund that we just had. EBLR, this is the one that everybody overfunded about 6 or 7 years ago. This one really is to pay off, now very specifically, 403B retirement accounts that when a teacher retires, there's a very specific amount in a contract that they can get back in terms of a value for every day. So this is one that could be utilized because we probably will have retirements and you could tap into this. Our current potential liability is about 600,000. So this is a low balance in that sense. If everybody were to, you know, retire, but I don't think we're going to get that. If we get everybody to retire that could retire, we'll probably be pretty good on our budget because we'll have a lot of breakage, but I don't see that happening.
Click.
Yeah. Oh, this is a scroll. This is not a click. Capital reserve. This is the one that we tapped into for the capital expenditure of the buses. And this will be one that I will recommend. Let's spend the rest of this 1.5 million. Actually, in this budget year, we spent about 1.2 million. There's about 250,000 left, which is going to fit in nicely with our fleet plan and filling in one of the gaps that we'll have in our budget.
So let's tell them how we put money in reserves, because that's really where they come into it.
Oh, yes. So the reserve, so when we come back to this document in May or June, So I'll do a fund balance projection to say, okay, if we're going to have a surplus, this is what I estimate that it will be. And in that May or June meeting, when we have this discussion, more than likely in June, we'll end up saying, okay, if we look like we're going to have a reserve of about $1 million, we'll put forth a resolution to move, X amount of surplus after the audit to, this reserve, and this reserve. So we'll have a resolution saying which reserves we want to fund come 6/30 of that year. And then we fund those reserves, we put them away, and then they're dedicated to those specific purposes. So when we get to a budget season, we come back to this document in November and we start to say, okay, of these reserves that we can tap into for our budget to fill gaps if necessary, we know which one should we use. So that's kind of how that process works. Any questions on that? No? The use on this reserve, though, is a little bit different. Again, they're not all the same. This one does require the proposition also. So there are a few like that, and the capital reserve is one of those, which, again, that's why it makes this one somewhat tricky as opposed to the ERS, because that's just a board resolution. This one, we got to have the voter proposition. That's why I would say let's do the voter proposition since they're kind of used to the idea of doing it for the buses. I think that would be a positive vote again this coming year, so then we can use this up. And then if we have a capital project coming, that would be one that we would know a couple years in advance. So again, usually it's part of the package that you sell to the voters to say, we're not going to have an increase in taxes because we have these savings that we'll tap into to offset the local tax increase, which again, earlier in the plan had referenced that. That's another good use because it's a one-time hit. Repair reserve, again, this is one that you could utilize, but one that we don't have yet. And it's one to think about. Another one that's a possibility for a district, but not high priority, but I did include it in there just so you could read that. The mandatory reserve for debt service. This is another one I think we probably should tap into on a regular basis because this is related to old debt that we have from old capital projects. Over the past couple of years, we have been getting premium payments on borrowings that we've had on bands. So the premium is just what they pay us money that brings the actual interest, the effective interest rate down on the sale of the bond. So what you're supposed to do is this money from those purposes, or if you have money left over at the end of the project, so say you borrow 30 million and you only spend 29,500,000, that extra 500,000 goes into this reserve and you're supposed to use that to pay off the debt. So we do have a lot of old debt and I don't think we've been utilizing it to pay off old projects. So this is one that I think, we could start to whittle down just because obviously we're not using it to pay old debt that it's probably related to because this has been like this for quite some time. So we really should start using it up because this is obviously related to old debt that's coming off the books. Now, at the very end here, we have kind of the analysis of appropriated fund balance, unassigned fund balance, and what it is relative to the budget and that 4% that the tax law requires us to be under or at. And I think everyone heard the auditor say, though, that they wouldn't necessarily blame us for being above the 4% because obviously in these fiscal times, it's kind of hard to budget as close as the state would like us to. 4% isn't a really large margin to kind of have unappropriated or unassigned fund balance. So that analysis is also at the end. And then I included for your perusal a chart of all the different reserves that are out there. I think there's a few on here that I didn't include in this plan.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, they keep at, they add some here and there. And then it shows you the restrictions, the funding source, whether it's a board resolution or a vote. And if you kind of look at it, I'm looking at it sideways right now. The only one that really has that voter issue when Mr. Wojtyla pointed it out was that capital reserve. And that's what makes it a little bit touch and go because you got to get the voters to kind of give you the blessing to use the money in that reserve. Obviously, the reserves, we could just do the board resolution. It gives you a bit more flexibility. But usually you pair up the capital reserve with a one-time very specific purchase like we did with the buses or a project. So,
okay, so I do have a question.
Yes.
So the 5 million, that's the assigned appropriated fund balance.
Yes.
That's like the total of all of these that you talked about, right? And then the unassigned fund balance is like a separate account. Is that right?
Well, no, let me
Go back to the beginning.
go back.
Go back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, let me go back to the PowerPoint.
So in savings, essentially, right? So we have all of these accounts in savings, and then separately this one, and then separately this one.
Yes, let me go. Yeah, let me go back to the PowerPoint. Hold on 1 second. I know exactly the slide we need to go to. Okay. All right. So this slide here is the makeup of the.
You're not sharing.
Oh, whoops. Oh, there we go. All right. So this is everybody see the slide with the fund balance trend? Yes. Okay. So this shows the makeup of each of the types. So the unassigned fund balance at the end of this audit was almost $5 million. So that's the fund balance that we don't have appropriated. It's just really there as part of our equity or savings. The assigned is the fund balance that we have that's assigned to fill the revenue gap. So we have expenses of, so we'll say our budget was, and it was pretty close to $81 million, right? So we only had revenues that we were aware of in terms of state aid and taxes and things like that that would cover 76 million. So we use what we said in our budget was that we're going to use 5 million to fill the gap in terms of a revenue source. And that revenue source is coming directly out of our savings. Now, if we actually spent that, like if our expenses actually went over 76 million, which they didn't, we would have been burning some of this money. But we stayed under, so we actually made more money. Well, we had more revenue. We're not really making money because we're being aided, but we had more revenue. So if I go back to this slide,
it's like we budgeted to buy the Cadillac, but when we got there, we loved the Chevy, so we had more money that we didn't spend.
Yeah, so I mean, you budget a little bit higher. Obviously, we're trying to be conservative. We're not going to budget low and then say, "Oh man, we don't have enough money for any of this." So we're budgeting high, and we're able to keep those costs low, keep them under control, so that our revenue exceeded the expenses about $800,000. Now that $800,000 went into this unassigned.
Okay, so the 8 million is all of these added up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now there's a couple other non-spendable items that incorporate this, because I know when I go to this slide here, you're looking at this and it's not exact. It's $8,271,346, and that's because also included in this restricted is some of the money that we have restricted for food service. So like our inventory on food and stuff like that ends up in this total also. So that's the reconciling difference there.
So if the assigned is used to fill the gap, I get that. So what would the unassigned be used for then?
The unassigned is just there. It's just the extra money that we have in savings that is just in our piggy bank, so to speak, that we could utilize down the road. That we could move that to.
So
we could move it to assigned or appropriated, or we could move it to reserves. But you're allowed to have 4%, and you really want to have it unassigned because that kind of gives you the latitude to fluctuate things from year to year.
Yeah. So when we get into the budget and we're short and we don't want to cut programs, we go into our savings account. But you can see in the green, we were up as high in 16-17 as 6,681,000 to balance the budget. And then we've been trying to bring that down because you don't want a real high number to balance your budget every year. So, and you can see our savings was very low back in 14-15. So, so we're in a good spot right now, but we'd like to see the green a little bit lower, and the state would like to see that dark blue a little bit lower.
Yes.
So we got to budget tighter, and we got to, make sure that our program, we're not filling program that we don't need.
Correct. And and having that red area, the restricted, we could start to really fill that up. I mean, that you'll never get in trouble for having a lot of good reserves filled up. And as you can see in our retirement reserves, 2.6 million in the ERS and TRS, I mean, we could fill those right up without any problem, and the state wouldn't have a single problem with that because they know, when you have the economic downturns, those are the two numbers when those spike, and we've talked about that before. When those spike, those are hitting your payroll, and just 1% of your payroll go is your increase in your budget that's a big number. That's a big number. So that's why they don't mind having that one be that area. So good question. Thank you. Any other questions before I hit the last couple slides here?
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the bar chart?
This?
Yep. So
Okay. Yeah.
if it's been suggested that we've had more money in the unassigned pool, why have we not in the past just taken the difference over the 4% and put it into our restricted? Is there a reason against doing that?
Oh, the 4.8 million?
Yeah.
No. I mean, that's really, so come this year, it's just there really wasn't an extensive detailed plan. So I think now that we have that could be our work every, May and June is we close up on the budget and hopefully have a positive vote, and we know, where we're going to end up. Then we can start to really look at this 4.8 and say, how do we get this closer to the 4%?
Yes, and we should work to do that. The unassigned is just that. If something comes up and we need it, or you want to add a ton of program, or you don't get retirements, or something gets hit, you can assign it, right? But then it's gone because it's not going to come back. When you put it in the red, you can only use it in the spot you put it. So if I need unemployment and we put it in retirement, it doesn't help us. We still got to pull from the navy blue. So the navy blue gives you flexibility to spend it where you need it. If something comes up, the red, you can only spend what you put in for that specific one. So you're guessing what you're going to need it. So, it should be lower and it should be closer to the 4%, but I wouldn't go way under 4% because then you're tying your hands.
Correct. Yeah, you lose the flexibility there.
So I guess if this year becomes a year where we're short,
Yes.
we would want, I would think, to use that navy blue fund first, without having to make cuts, or would your approach to be cut a little bit, use a little bit?
We use the navy blue a little bit, and we always try to balance, cut a little bit, spend a little bit, because there's no guarantee what you're going to be able to put in the navy blue every year.
But wouldn't you use the green first? Because that has to be used to close the gap?
Yes. So when we assigned it, the green would be burned first. That would be the appropriated fund balance that we're burning, because the green and blue are kind of almost one and the same to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
That's where the number can fluctuate. But the more we appropriate in green, the more we're saying we're going to burn fund balance, and then at some point it's going to end up happening if you're not.
The green is what we're saying balanced our budget. So you have to put 5 million in next year, or you got to cut right away.
Right.
Or pull from your savings. So you want that green number, in my opinion, to be 4 million. And we've not been there. We've gone up and down, up and down. But in my opinion, for a district this size, it shouldn't be bigger than 4.
Yeah, that would be appropriate. That gives us about a month to spend too. Just for cash flow purposes, you do want to kind of have a somewhat significant number there, because what you don't want to have a situation is like what just happened to us recently, where the state withheld some of our aid payments, or those get delayed. And if we don't have the money to pay our bills, we end up having to borrow money if we don't have it in one of these two areas, because we have a cash flow crunch. And then when you're borrowing money, you got all the expenses to go with it, the legal, the interest, everything else, and it makes it more complicated. So in a certain sense, you want to have, a fair amount of money here too, just for cash flow purposes. And these two of these, so we're running about 6 million a month. So the two of these together gives us almost about 2 months of cash flow. So you also want to have that some liquidity there, that if the state decides not to give you 20% of your aid, like they did, say, oh, we'll give it to you later. Well, while we're waiting, we still have to pay our bills.
Yeah.
So that's why you do want to have some liquidity here also. You don't want to throw it all into the red, the reserves, because you're not supposed to spend that, even though it's in our bank account.
Ideally, over the next couple of years, we want to get back to looking like 14, 15, the year 14, 15. And have maybe make, you know, a little bit more in the navy blue, but
Yeah.
that would be the place to be. And that was really when he kind of fixed the GEA that he was messing with for a long time, and then he gave us some funds back. So that's where all districts are trying to get back to that. But we're in good shape because I think we'll get retirements. We got a lot of cost savings in capital projects that we did through the lighting and energy. And we have a plan now to fund reserves so that we should be under the 4% in the unassigned.
And if they don't do a cut this year, we might end up with a surplus this year. You never know. You know, we did spend a lot due to COVID, but because of, you know, conservative budgeting and some other cuts that we made this year, we might come out ahead unless they do a reduction in aid. So if we come out ahead this year, that'd be a good time to really, you know, kind of say, okay, this is what we can do to fill the gap. The only unfortunate thing is we're doing that projection months before the budget's done, right? So we're doing all these projections. We still have, a few more months of operation. So who knows what could happen? I mean, look at this past year.
So when you spent everything that you needed to get prepped for COVID, it came out of the blue.
Well, I guess
Yes and no.
where it's coming out of right now, it would come out of the green because that's what we appropriated. But what I'm saying too is that I'm not sure that our revenues won't exceed our expenses again this year. I think we've had a spike in the COVID type of issues, but I also know I've been squeezing on operations and maintenance. We've had some programs that we've been able to trim a bit in special education. So, we're still continuing to try to squeeze the expense side. So
we're spending less in sports.
Right.
There's a lot of things that, when we get farther into the budget, you'll see.
Yeah, and we'll get some FEMA money. I do have some confirmation on that. I don't want to put a number out there yet, but I do have confirmation we'll get some FEMA money. So, yeah, we might have some other revenue streams that come through.
Click along there, Skippy.
Yeah, okay. If there's no other questions.
No, we'll take questions.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at 21-22, we'll probably come back to this, and this isn't too different than every year. We want to stay within the tax cap, allocate resources so we're supporting initiatives and strategic plans, keeping pace with technology, again, continuing to improve operational efficiency, maintain that safety and security throughout the district, and reduce the appropriate fund balance. And as we go along, any additional Board of Education directive. So the study sessions coming forward, we'll have a rollover budget at some point. I think maybe even in January. I might hold off on salaries again, just because it is a little premature, and I do want to make sure I have a better sense of what's going on with staffing. But when we do look at a rollover, it's essentially if we just maintain our contractual agreements, that's where we stand at that point in time. So it's all things that are contractually we're obligated to increase in the budget. That's the rollover. So in summary, I think the idea again, and talked about this last year, stability and efficiency, and specifically that orange area there, the planned use of reserves. I think it's a good place to start a budget season. That's why we had the talk tonight, so we could better understand this concept and kind of use it to fill those gaps that we are expecting in the coming year due to the reduction in state aid. So thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, we can come back to those. I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
Everybody's still awake. All right.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. All right. So I guess we can roll our agenda at 8.1. As recommended, the Board of Education approves the order agenda as presented. Or are there any additions, deletions, or changes? All right. Not hearing any, just need a motion.
So moved.
All right, Gabby in a second.
Second.
All right, Erica, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries, and we will go down to 9.9. It is recommended the Board of Education approves all the consent agenda as recommended by the superintendent of schools. I will make the motion on that. Just need a second.
Second.
All right, Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, and we'll drop down to 10.1. It is recommended that the Board of Education approves the personnel agenda as presented, or are there any additions, deletions, or changes? All right, not hearing any, just need a motion.
So moved.
All
Second.
right, Zach in a second.
Second.
All right, Krista, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries, and we will go down to 11.25. It is recommended that the Board of Education approves all of the personnel items in section 11 as presented. Just need a motion.
So moved.
All right, Colleen in a second.
Second.
Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And then Mr. Whitesell, I don't know if you want to call out, there was some retirements in there.
There was. Let me go back here. We had a couple of, one was a custodial cleaner, Donna Carr, and we had, well, that was a resignation. But Donna had been here and on and off, started as a cleaner, and it listed from 2012, but I know she was here way back when I was teaching at Gilmore. So we wish Donna all the best in her retirement. Did I miss one? Oh, there's two. The other one is Lucy, and she has been here since 1996, and we wish them all the best and a healthy, happy, long retirement. All right.
Absolutely.
We have policy 5670, records management, which is a lot of wording. I don't know if Mr. Halesko can click on it and share his screen, but this talks about how long we preserve records, how we preserve records, how we can move them into digital form and preserve them. And there are lots of times that we need to go back years and years to do these types of things. We have a microfiche machine, if you remember those. Anyone's old enough to remember that, but so we have that still. And so this records management policy keeps us in line with what the state is recommending. And there's nothing in there that we're not working towards or doing already. It was just some updates to how long you have to keep certain records as far as personnel, educational, and that type. Was there an attachment there, Mr. Halesko?
Yeah.
We're in 12.1.
Okay, here we go. And which one do you want, Greg? You
Well,
want
they're
records
all
management?
very similar, but you can open with the first one.
Okay.
So as you can see, it's talking about the designated by the superintendent to approve and the Board of Education, such records management officer shall coordinate. We have Christopher Cluster who's working on this as well. You can page down on that page. This is just basically saying that we have one. The preservation of electronic records, all basics on this one. If you want to go microfiche, we're going to move to electronic images, that kind of stuff. Let's go back, Mr. Halesko.
Okay.
Too far back.
Yep. Bear with me 1 second.
I think if you just click that one.
I got my toolbar in the way. That's what the problem was. Here we go.
All right, so here's a change where you say this, the superintendent changes to the district. Will retain records for such a period and get rid of such a period. Will retain records and dispose them in accordance with the retention disposition schedule for New York local government records. So it's all stuff that we have to do. It's nothing that we can change or do. It's getting more specific so that districts keep pace with that. if you want to open the other one, Pat.
Okay.
And this one, again, for records management is a clean version of the first one, I believe. If we go down to the bottom, I think it's the same one. Yeah. So I recommend that you just approve it because there's very slight changes to it, and it's all stuff that we've been working towards. And it puts us in good position for the future.
All right. Does anyone have any questions on this one before we take action on it? All right. So just need a motion to approve the policy 5670 as presented by the superintendent of schools.
So moved.
All right, Erica, and I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
All right. I'm going to check just to make sure Debbie, she said she'd come in if she got any calls, but I'll double check. And then I just want to review a little bit for the next meeting. Actually, it's fun because she's on the delay watching it. We have a little bit of delay, so Matthew was calling for the vote. No calls. So next month at the policy meeting, or this month on the 16th, when we meet, Katie Smith will be coming back. We've been working on that sort of the Title IX changes and that type of thing. We've been working with Erie One quite a bit and Wayne Van Vliet, BOCES of ON, where Wayne Van Vliet works, Orleans Niagara, shared their updates and changes. And so we've been reviewing those and meeting to come to the board with some red lines and suggestions for you going forward. I will try and get them to you on the 11th so that you have time to review them before the meeting, but we'll go through them in detail at the meeting as well. Anything else for the good of the order?
The only thing I have, I don't know if I mentioned at the last meeting, but I did get a chance to meet with Jill O'Malley from the Erie County School Board Association. So we're going to look to maybe do something in January where she'll do a presentation for us around advocacy and kind of what their best practices are, and then look to see how we want to move forward with that. I know that was something we've talked about a couple times. So I did get a chance to meet with her. So we'll look at calendars for sometime in January. We don't have to do it as a specific meeting if we want to. She said she could do it as a one-off, as like a board retreat kind of thing as well. So we're kind of open as far as the dates for that goes.
All right.
Because it is an hour or so of training.
Yeah, as far as advocacy goes, I'm going to be attending NYSBA's advocacy webinar on the 10th as well. It was in our email, or at least I got an email on it in my school district email, so I signed up for that webinar.
And Matthew, they're doing the breakfast still, but it's going to be virtual with our legislators coming up, I saw.
Yep, correct.
Okay, so a lot to come on that advocacy front. And if we want to be part of that group and then they help us and guide us with what's going on, I think we'll see some changes coming up with the budget season, right? Everyone's going to be getting in line to sort of say, don't take our money. And a lot of it we know is going to go to help COVID and hospital and that type of stuff. So school districts will be there. It'll be a tight one. We know what the city has done with their taxes. So nobody gets to vote on that really. So when they come out to vote for the school tax, we know we can't have a huge hike at all. But I also caution the board that too many zeros in a row puts us in trouble. So we're in good shape. We don't have to go real high. We could be at zero again for another year. I think we'll run the numbers when we see what's happening with the cuts and everything. But those are the years that you might want to consider a small increase because then in future years you could stay lower. It's all that kind of thing. No one wants to go out with a 5, 6, 7% increase. You want to keep it under if you can. So little bits along the way help do that. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, well, I will see you before the holidays. Gabby, I put your tickets in today. Thank you. If anyone wants to stop in and do that, they're welcome to do that. And we will be together again on the 16th.
All right. Just need a motion to adjourn at 7:34.
So moved.
All right, Zach, a second.
Second.
All right, Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much,
All right.
everyone.
Stay safe, everybody.